Before I dive into the content of my presentation, what I'd like to do is give the audience an understanding, a background onto why I dug into this topic of leveraging your ISO investment to find the synergy between that and your CMMI adoption and implementation. In working with clients, especially in the aerospace and defense industry, what I have come across time and time again is I will work with executives or senior managers from a prospect perspective. In other words, I'm scoping what they want to do, and they've decided that they want to adopt the CMMI and perhaps achieve a maturity level. And what I hear quite frequently from prospective clients and from others in the industry is that the statement, something to the effect of, well, if we're ISO registered or we have an AS9100 registration, we must be CMMI maturity level 2, or we must already be CMMI maturity level 3. And they make those statements without ever opening the book or ever sending anyone to the Intro to CMMI training. So it's an uninformed statement to make the assumption that just because you have an ISO registration or a TL9000 registration, that you're already doing a lot of the stuff in the CMMI. So what I did is I did a lot of research. Like I said, I'm both a CMMI lead appraiser and an AS9100 internal auditor. Now, this presentation that I'm going to give you is the highlights of what essentially is about a 25-page word table that goes down into the differences and similarities between the model and the standard in great detail. And so I'm going to give you just the highlights of that today. Now, my content is structured in different categories, so I'll tell you what those categories are. The differences between the model and the standard, I'm going to talk about the differences between their purpose, their structure, and intended use. Also, the content focus of the CMMI versus AS9100 and life cycle applicability. Implementation, I'll talk about, how organizations typically adopt the standard versus the CMMI. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the differences between CMMI appraisals and audit. And then after I go through the differences and you understand that, then I'll show you where the leverage points are between the CMMI and ISO 9000. So let's start with purpose, structure, and intended use. And the highlights, the difference are that the CMMI are guidelines for improving software and systems engineering. That is the purpose of the model. Whereas in AS9100 world or ISO world, the standards are viewed as requirements, primarily for production and manufacturing. So big difference, systems and software engineering versus production and manufacturing. The other major difference is that the CMMI is informative but not prescriptive, whereas the standard is prescriptive but not all that informative. It provides practice, interpretation, and implementation guidance. The AS9100 standard and ISO do not provide interpretation and implementation guidance. It's just really a size difference. I kind of chuckle when people say, well, the CMMI and ISO are the same thing. The CMMI is 688 pages, 421 practices in 22 process areas. In comparison, the standard is 33 pages, 72 standard clauses in 5 areas. CMMI, the project and organizational performance excellence is the end goal, whereas the end goal in the standard is maintaining compliance with the standard. Now, let's talk about content focus and product realization life cycle applicability. In the CMMI, the focus is on product engineering, from requirements to what many of you would consider transition to production, whereas in AS9100, the primary focus is on production and manufacturing. CMMI, there's a fundamental concept is that there's a unit of work that's based on a program or a project, whereas in AS 9100, it's based on operations. It really doesn't incorporate the concept of a unit of work. The CMMI accommodates multiple life cycles. AS 9100, being more of a production and manufacturing-based standard, presumes a waterfall life cycle model. There are 6 process areas defining 45 practices in engineering disciplines in the CMMI, whereas the AS 9100 allocates exactly 5 paragraphs to product design and development. And that's not one of the areas that, according to the standard, has to be a documented procedure. The process areas that define 54 practices in project management in the CMMI. In AS 9100, it only provides no standards at all for project management and provides minimal standards for risk management. As a matter of fact, in AS 9100 and ISO, there's a paragraph that simply says something to the effect of apply project management practices as applicable. And somehow that some people want to believe that equates to the 5 process areas and 54 practices in the CMMI. There are 5 process areas that define 38 practices in processes related to process development, process management, and continuous process improvement. Focus in for a QMS development and management in the standard, and there's only 6 standards-based procedures that are required to be documented if you are ISO compliant or AS 9100 compliant. Slide. The CMMI, via a glossary, provides definitions for 226 terms and phrases that are used in the model. The glossary in AS 9100 provides definition for 4 terms, and unfortunately it doesn't provide a definition for what constitutes the word manual, as in a QMS manual or a procedural manual, and it doesn't define what's meant by a procedure or a documented procedure. In maturity level 4 and 5, they provide 4 process areas for quantitative process performance improvement. There's nothing provided by the standard that defines approaches, practices, or methods for quantitative process or performance improvement. This provides institutionalization goals and practices. And by this, for those of you who are not familiar with the CMMI, institutionalization practices are practices that ensure the organization, when they implement it, that it becomes the standard way of doing business, and maintaining process discipline with the aid of the process institutionalization practices doesn't require a special person or a team to be there or any particular skill set. The process is institutionalized, whereas in the standard, the concept of institutionalization isn't addressed at all. There are some leverage points, and I apologize for my question reference there, but I will get to those leverage points in terms of institutionalization relationships in the standard. CMMI provides concepts for process tailoring. The standard does not provide information for tailoring the performance of a QMS. The CMMI provides process areas and practices for establishing and maintaining a process definition capability, and there's nothing in the standard that addresses establishing an organizational function to maintain the QMS.